And welcome to episode 18 of the Brewed Sages, Stormbound players with a head for the game. I am Freeloader, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts Arthas and Sabaiku. Sabaiku, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic.
And Arthas, how are you doing?
I'm doing grape, and I love grapes.
And I like to eat grapes. We are the Brewed Sages. And as a reminder, you can always follow us at Brewed Sages on Twitter. Or for all of you who recognize the phrase, I pitied a fool, our email address is thebrewedsages@gmail.com. Hey guys, this week we have had all kinds of crazy stuff. There's even a new channel in Discord, Deck Order. Arthas, walk me through this.
All right, guys, we got a new thing. It's called Deck Order, and I applied for a spot for it. And what's awesome is that, for one, the channel description, we got fresh, organic decks, locally sourced from the free-range designers. Read the pinned messages to obtain your own deck. And basically, you can submit like a deck order through this Google survey form. It tells you about what rank are you in? What kind of faction would you like to play? Any cards you want included? Any particular type of playstyle? Anything like that, you put that through this survey form in the main Discord in the Deck Order channel, and we take your submissions and we do the best we can to supply with you the best deck that we can come up with that fits the criteria you sent us. And on top of that, after building a deck and sharing, we also give you some very, very detailed deck insights, such as what the main objective of the deck is, any weaknesses it has, particular synergies or priorities, and it's just so well thought out. And a lot of people are having so much fun getting new decks and having some real insights that not everyone can really think of, but I can assure you we can think of them. And it's great because I think this is a wonderful way to really test out any new waters in the game. Let's say maybe you got a new card or you finally leveled it up to something playable, but you just don't know what kind of deck to put it in or how to play it. Well, Deck Order is for you. Slap that in, put that new card as your inclusion, and we'll do the best we can to help you.
Now, can you do more than one card in your deck order?
Oh yeah, some people asked for 3 cards.
I have this desire for an Avian Stalker Joust Champion Rapid Mouser deck. I was thinking about posting it.
That might take a while to process, but we will get to you if you send it in.
Nice. But I only want free range Avian Stalkers. Let's be clear about that. All right, and Sabaiku, there's always been a deck building tool, has there not?
There has always been a deck building tool at stormbound-kitty.com/deck. Now, this is a build your own deck kind of thing. You don't get the kind of thoughtful advice and consideration that the free range designers will provide you. But if you're looking to put something together for yourself, consider this your weekly reminder to go to stormbound-kitty.com. You can build your own deck. You can get some basic analytics under the Insight tab, like average speed of the card, average mana cost, number of cards playable on your first turn. It's a nice all-around tool that we definitely encourage you to use.
Yeah, it also comes with some very general tips like, we notice you're lacking AoE, or many of your cards don't move at first, so you might struggle with defense. So consider adding more movement. Or let's say you added a card that needs synergy, but you forgot to put the synergy in there, and it will remind you. It's pretty nice.
We notice you're playing Brewed Sages, but nothing in your deck poisons anything.
It's there for spirit.
We recommend Brewed Sages in every deck.
Exactly right. Next up, guys, this is our tournament section. So we love plugging tournaments. We're going to go in reverse order this week because you'll find out very quickly. We have a little surprise for you guys, but first up then is the new tournament coming out. There's a Brazilian tournament. Debnath posted it on Reddit. You can go. I'm not going to read the link, but we'll have it posted. Signups are right now. Big shout out to Debnath, wishing him good luck in his tournament. And so we go from the beginning of a new tournament to the end of the last one. The Conquest tournament is done. Arthas, who won?
So, Conquest tournament recently finished, and Mr. Grimm wins.
Ooh.
Really amazing. Lawbro Bets being the second place runner-up, and after that, Shades takes third place over Hanu, Very, very impressive, by the way. And yeah, that's what we got. And from that, I know if some people out there are more interested to hear about the tournament, and I'm sure a lot of you are, because it's been really, really hyped out. Really nice that Berzosa was supporting it, and lucky for us, we get to hear some of the insights and the experience straight from the tournament winner, Grim, right now in this interview. All right, guys, we are joined here today by Grim. Say hello to our listeners.
Hello, everyone.
And Grim, amazing job on winning the Conquest tournament recently. I don't know, it's pretty interesting because we got someone pretty new to the equals and tournament scene to actually take a major tournament from many of the top players. What kind of experience have you had prior to the Conquest tournament that showed some success in the equals meta?
Yeah, so what really started me going into the equals meta was probably the Faction Wars season. I played two of them from like October this year, the 2020. And so basically, I came in the equals meta with the Brazos announcement of the Faction Wars team. Played two seasons there. It like helped me understand like what cards do people play, what cards are good, just like basic strategies, basic decks in equals, like what is good, what is bad. Then the two tournaments I actually take part in is the attack and defense joust from Reckless, which is where people play by pairs. So I have a partner. My partner is Helios. As you can guess, getting Helios as your partner is pretty good.
For sure.
So yeah, we're on a way to win this right now. And also Helios like traded me a lot for this because he needs a good partner. Like I was not a good partner entering the ANZ scene, but like now I feel like yep, maybe I'm good.
You definitely proved that by winning an entire major tournament. And that's pretty surprising because from what you said, you are very, very new to the equals
I
meta.
am
I
very,
know,
very used to the equals meta.
yeah, it takes a lot of adjustment from people because it's very, very different from ranked, right? It's not the same type of cards or levels, you know?
Yeah.
And it's crazy how much success you found just from that. I know you said you played in Faction Wars, and yes, Faction Wars was amazing practice for equals, especially for me as well. Unfortunately, it's in a little bit of a break right now, but it's probably coming up very soon again. So back to Conquest tournament. What exactly was your what were your deck choices or like faction choices throughout the whole thing?
Okay, so my faction choices actually swapped like from quarterfinals to semifinals to finals. The group stage, the quarterfinals, I was experimenting with Swarm because of the Xur buff. Like that could be really powerful, but unfortunately, like still didn't turn out good. It was still a lot weaker. Not a lot, but it just had like Swarm has a bad matchup against Winter because Winter's just insane.
Right,
Then
yeah.
Storm has a bad matchup against Shadowfan. I mean, naturally, because Shadowfan has a lot of poisoning, they have a lot of answers, and that's like what Swarm is weak to. And then when we see like Swarm versus Ironclad, then I just prefer like the guaranteed value of a Phoenix over like the somewhat value of Bucks.
Right.
So like Ironclad versus Swarm. Actually, like if the decks are good, I think in one-on-one I would bet on Swarm, but Ironclad just has a lot more potential versus Winter and Shadowfan.
Yeah, it seems to be very, very common nowadays. Swarm is probably, in general consensus, the weakest faction in equals. Definitely the hardest one to play, just because a lot of its cards don't have that much value in general. So a lot of the players in this tournament played, Ironclad, Shadowfen, Winter when they have to choose their three factions. Did you do that as well then?
Yep, that's exactly the lineup I went in for the finals. I had some variations of those decks, like I had at least two of every faction, just in case. Like Ironclad Aggro, Ironclad Midrange, Ironclad Control, and stuff.
Oh wow.
They were all like pretty much sideboarded against different decks that Laura could play. Like this one is if I had to face like the Ironclad Mirror, this one's for Winter, this one's for Shadowfen. Yeah, so basically that's what I went with into the finals. You can
See,
now tell.
actually, you had so much like prep then. You had like many decks already. Did you make these decks like before you started playing any matches?
I mean, with Laura, yes. I prepped them almost from the day we finished semifinals. I knew I was going from behind because I'm not like as skilled as Hanu, I'm not as skilled as Dirk. So against them, I actually had a lot of prep too. Like, I had 4 to 5 decks, but not as much as for the finals.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I'm pretty sure a lot of people in that tournament kind of just winged what deck field, all right at the time. I mean, I know I definitely did that. Usually I would prepare more, but I kind of just went with what I felt at the time. So unfortunately I got eliminated, Lamau.
Yeah, because the tournament seems simple, alright? You like bring 3 decks to fight. Like it seems simple enough, but there's actually like a lot more stuff going on. Like if you think about it, when you win with 2 of the decks, then you have to bring the last one to actually win with it. Then
Right.
like the enemy can sideboard against it. Like bring all the cards that bet against Shadowfen, bring all the cards that's bet against Sirenclad and stuff. So actually what most players, including me and Laura, did was we played Winter Third in the first 3 wins meta. We played our Winter decks last, so we could guarantee win this because Winter is just insane right now in Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's by far the best.
I can't believe they didn't ban like something like Zavana. Oh my god, that thing's breaking everything.
Yeah, actually, I think the Giovanna buff would be so good. Oh, oh my god, no! Please don't.
Yeah, so it's great because this tournament is quite different from most of the traditional tournaments in Stormbound, and that is that we don't have to submit any decks when we apply for a spot. Most of the time you have to build a deck during the 1 week signups, and you submit that, and you're basically stuck with that deck.
Yep.
And not just that, people get to see your deck because usually it's available to see by your opponents so that they can enforce that you're playing the deck you submitted. But here, there are no deck submissions whatsoever. Are there times where being able to change your cards for one faction really helped you a lot in any of your matches?
Oh, it helped me a lot, like in all of my matches, like from the group stage to all the way to the finals. I always change some cards. I mean, I think it doesn't apply to the games when I was winning like 2-0. So against Dirk and Hanu, I swapped a lot because that's actually what I actually used to win 2 games in a row. Like I lost the first one, then I won 2 in a row. How did I do it?
Wow.
That's like some psychological trick I kind of came up on my own. Like I've noticed during playing the group stage and like training practice that a lot of people like to keep the deck when they lose. Why do they do it? Because like if you win, you get a disadvantage. You have to swap your deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a disadvantage. So when you lose and you don't have that disadvantage, you kind of want to go for the advantage. So keeping the deck, like it's psychologically logical. And most of the players, not all of them, but most of the players actually kept the deck. So what I would do when I win a match is I would bring my second faction and I will like completely sideboard it against the faction I just played versus. And like 80% of the time, I would face the same deck. And I would completely obliterate them because I'm absolutely their counter pick.
So give us some examples of this, like cards or factions.
I mean, the finals are a great example. I was playing Shadowfen versus Shadowfen game 1. This is actually really interesting because, again, I told you we're both playing wins in 3rd place, so we could guarantee the win with the 3rd deck. And then we have Ironclad and Shadowfen for the first 2 matches, right? So then we kind of want to win first match. So what do? We know that Ironclad is somewhat weaker against Shadowfen. Like it's almost equal, but Shadowfen has a slight edge.
Mm-hmm.
So both of us would run Shadowfen, right? Before the match starts, I'll like take out my Shadowfen versus Shadowfen deck and make some adjustments to it to make it even more versus Shadowfen. So like
Okay.
it wouldn't actually stand a chance against Ironclad.
So what did you do? What did you do there?
So most of the stuff I did to my Shadowfen deck was put in the Siege Breakers, put in the Klaxi.
Oh, the
No, Klaxi
Klaxi.
actually was there. Yeah, Klaxi is really good in Shadowfen versus Shadowfen, in my opinion.
Wow.
It just brings so much tempo to the table. Klaxi is why I won, actually.
Yeah, in my experience, Klaxi is really bad in general. But then, if you knew that you were gonna have a Shadowfen mirror matchup, then it's like really good, right?
Yeah.
Dang, that's actually pretty crazy. And like, you went ahead to win the tournament, but because you've only had basically faction wars and a little bit of attack and defend as equals meta experience. What exactly was your expectations for the Conquest tournament? Like, how far would you have gone? How many games would you have won or lost? What was your original, expectation for yourself?
I mean, looking into the group stage, I was definitely passing in the first place because, like, there were some people that never actually played equals. Like, I never saw them. And I'm fairly certain that I have seen, like, almost all of the people who actually play equals competitively in my 2 seasons of Faction Wars and these tournaments. Then my quarterfinals match was against Dirk. Dirk is a really great player. I think he's somewhat better than me, but I was like, maybe it's like a 60-40 for him.
All
So
right.
even if I win versus Dirk, which is not exactly likely, I have to face Hanu in the semifinals. And Hanu is a god.
Yes. If the listeners don't already know, Hanu actually has the most tournament wins in Stormbound history right now.
Yeah, he does.
He actually won 8 gold medals, 3 silver medals, and 2 bronze medals. Second place being Helios with 5 gold and 1 silver, 1 bronze. So Hanu actually is very, very up there in terms of like success in the Tournament Hall of Fame, which, by the way, you can all check out in Stormbound Kitty, Tournament's Hall of Fame. Very nice, very interesting. You can also look at the decks that the winners used. Very, very cool. You guys should totally check that out. But yeah, back to you, Grim. Hanu is very, very powerful, right? Like, what were you expecting then?
When I was going into the match with Hanu, I was like, okay, I need to luck out. Like, that's the only way. Because I'm not beating Hanu fairly. And that's actually kind of what the match came down to. So Hanu wins the first match, I think. Then the second one, we play his Shadowfen versus my Ironclad, and I win it somehow. I just got like really good Phoenix value. He was a bit too controlling for to actually deal with Phoenixes. Phoenix is actually a great card in Ironclad if you know you're gonna be facing a slower deck, and a lot of equals meta is actually slower.
Yeah, in my experience, not a lot of people actually play Phoenix. They kind of undervalue it.
Yeah, Phoenix
because
is
they think it's
underrated a
really
lot.
slow.
Like, I think it's a hidden gem.
So how did you play Phoenix though? Did you just keep cycling and just spam Phoenix? Is that what you did?
Yeah, I kind of just kept cycling the spam Phoenix.
I'm surprised that was enough to
Then
overwhelm
I
him.
outvalued the second match, and then we go into the first game. So this is where I put, okay, I need to luck out. It's my Shadowfen versus, I think, his Shadowfen. So he just played his Quadia. There were 3 eggs on the table, and I had a Klex in hands, which would be active next turn. I needed to clear the board from the weak units, so I could transform his 3 strength spawns into my Klexy tokens. And then I had my Witches at base, which is when they go inside, they create a 1 strength token. That was really bad, because if they created it, then the Klexy play wouldn't be available, and I would have had like 3 strength 3 tokens at my base, and I would have probably lost. Like 95% sure I would have lost. The witch had a 50-50% chance to spawn the token either behind her, which I would have lost, or to the side, where my other unit would go into it, and then there would have been no actually like 2 or lesser strength units left on the board, which is,
Right.
is exactly what happened. I lucked out a 50-50.
You managed to win that 50-50 coin flip, and then you just
Yeah.
like activated your Klaxi trap card against Cordia.
Like transform everything like 5 units.
And did you win off that Klaxi play?
I definitely won off that Black Play.
Because like what? That's you killed 3 dragons of 3 strength, so you got 9 already, plus the 15
Plus
that
the Classic
replaced them,
itself, plus there
plus
was
the
at least
Klaxi
1 more
herself.
unit, like from my side. So it was like 31 strength.
That's crazy. And yeah, this is again from your planning on doing the Shadowfen mirror matchup, right? That's crazy that really worked out. I mean, against one of the top players, right?
Yeah.
Pretty big deal. Right after beating Hanu, and you started going against Lobro in the finals. Talk about how the finals went there, because that was a big one.
again, I was kind of talking about the fact that the Winters played last, the Shadowfans played first, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a Shadowfen versus Shadowfen mirror. His Shadowfen is just like, like basic good stuff. My Shadowfen is like destroy Shadowfen, no fun allowed. I win the first game. It wasn't easy because of course both decks are good. It was like a good first match. So I win match one. Then we move to the second match, and that's like when I actually realized that I don't have a good like versus Shadowfen Ironclad deck.
Oh.
Because like I know he's probably gonna keep Shadowfen. He won't switch to the Ironclad. So I just like on the spot build an Ironclad deck that's like absolutely designed to only beat Shadowfen. Like it beats nothing else. Like it was a semi-aggro Ironclad deck with hard guards, which actually beat Shadowfen, but like it's just as planned. It was pretty good. So we go into the third match, and I think if he would switch or not, like I decide that he wouldn't. Like I build a completely new Winter deck that's tailored to beat Shadowfen again, and then we go into the third match, and he has Winter, designed to
Oh
beat
man.
Winter, and that was like a really nerve-wracking moment because well, well then I have all those cards against Shadowfen like Siege Breakers. They're almost useless against Winter, which plays like no structures. I would have been far better off playing Melodious Systems. Actually, probably the Beast of Sarah would have been great there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the third match, which was Winter, I don't think I actually want to spoil it to you because it was a really interesting, really great match. I think you might have to go to Reckless Rush's YouTube channel to watch it.
Well, yeah, it was recorded.
He's planning to upload the recap of the finals, which I personally will go watch it.
So if he's gonna be uploading that, I like what Grim said. Totally should check it out on Reckless channel, right? Pretty sure you guys know Reckless Rush on YouTube, so that's probably where you can find it. I love seeing that a lot of newer players are finding a lot more success, even though there are still many of the regular top players in this competition. But like they're finding some good success. Very nice that a lot of new players are joining. And Grim, would you be joining more of these like tournaments or events much like this? Because I know there is a tournament going to be hosted by Hanu Street coming next, probably next week.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna take part in that, especially considering, who's banned from the tournaments.
Yeah, so if the listeners don't already know, usually the hosts of the tournaments are not allowed to play in the tournaments. So yeah, since Hanu is hosting, he probably won't be participating. So Grim, I have big expectations from you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we have it there, folks. Grim here, new equals player, winning an entire tournament. It's been really lovely to have you here in the podcast and to talk to you about your experience. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the support. Thank you.
Well, that was fantastic. That's a lot of really cool insights. I remember Sabaiku from my time playing in THL in Hearthstone that Conquest, one of the cool things about Conquest tournaments and Conquest style of play is always queue order and queue strategy, right? And Grim really hit on this idea of not only picking the factions to play in order based on which one you want to be left with in the end, but also the idea that if I can predict what my opponent is going to queue into, I know which deck I want to queue into next. What did you think of all that?
I think it's fantastic. It's great to see him applying some thought to it. You can kind of assume that your opponent is choosing their decks randomly, but that's really not the best way to go about it. Assume that your opponent is putting as much thought into it as you are. And it was great to see Grim really thinking about it. And, obviously when he was talking about preparing for that last match in the finals, predicting his opponent would bring one faction when he brought another instead, he still rolled with the punches and was able to bring home the victory.
And Arthas, what do you think about all the eggs in one basket kind of idea of going for a Shadowfen deck that only counters the mirror?
I mean, I was impressed that he pulled it off, but I would never do something like that. I mean, as a control player, I take the low risk medium to low rewards.
Yeah, and that's maybe one of the advantages of this tournament that I think he really seized upon was the fact that you could alter your deck lists even in the middle of a match if you wanted to.
Right. That's very different. If my so back when I used to play a lot of Conquest, once I've beaten my opponent with a specific deck, I would always keep the best counter to that deck, if it wasn't the one I won with, in my back pocket. Because if my opponent got to the point where that was the only deck he had left to play, I'd be like, bad news, dude. I've got the counter for you. But in this particular tournament, even if I saw a specific Shadowfen deck in game one and I beat it, I have no idea if I'm going to see that deck again because you're allowed to go change the deck every single time. Arthas, that's crazy. There's so much gamesmanship here of I know you know what I've got,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like craziness.
I mean, most of the experience that I had with something like that, where it's so dynamic, what kind of cards you can put in, and it's like you have some very nice trap cards that aren't revealed instantly because your deck is invisible. Like I see this from Faction Wars, and like Grim said, he also got most of his equals experience from Faction Wars, which by the way will probably be starting very soon again. It's taking a break, but yeah, totally should check that out. There's a Discord for that, and you can find it in the main server too. But yeah, in Faction Wars, you're not forced to build a particular deck, and that means you don't have to send any. You don't have to tell the opponents what kind of cards you have, and you can really like completely bamboozle them. Like for example, me when I played Swarm a lot in Faction Wars, I would for the first game I would just play like a regular Swarm deck, kind of rushy, kind of mid-rangey, and then maybe they're running Execution, and they're thinking, oh, okay, like I don't need to run Execution. I should probably put something else. And then I whip out the Pillars of Doom second round. They don't have Execution, free win.
Gosh, that's brutal. All right, well, hats off to Grim. I thought he played fantastically. I did not get to call the finals like you did with Reckless. I did get to call the semifinals, and fantastic job by Shades to win. But also tip of the hat to Hanu for the ridiculous amount of memeing.
Yeah, actually though, I mean he won. He won a round with Mech Workshop.
Dude,
I don't remember the last time that happened.
We have a main topic to discuss, which is unexpectedly just sort of like Christmas in the middle of the month. Sabaiku, we got a new card.
We got a new card. We got the Temple of Focus, the first of 6 new structures that we know we're going to be seeing. We don't know what the timetable for release is, but we sure know that the first one is in the game right now. So this is an epic swarm structure. It's 3 mana. The strength of the tower is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So pretty decent body for the mana cost, which is important for sure. The text is a little complicated, so we'll talk through it. It's at the start of your turn, deconfuse and give 1 additional movement to all friendly units in front. Deal 1 damage to itself when a boosted unit reaches the enemy base. Now, to break this down a little bit, the deconfuse, I think, is something that caused, pun intended, a lot of confusion on Discord when the card was first released. Deconfuse is not necessarily meant to be a counter to confusion-based decks, although it certainly can do that. We think it's there really just to guarantee that the units move forward, to put the focus in the card name. The real meat of this is the 1 additional movement to all friendly units in front. So when your units are lined up in a column, at the start of your turn, the tower triggers, everything moves up 1, and then the normal unit movement phase happens and everything moves up 1 again. Now, when a unit that is either boosted by the tower on the tower phase or during the normal movement phase afterward reaches the enemy base, the tower will take 1 damage to itself. So it's got a little bit of a timer built in where it's going to self-destruct after you get utility out of it. Personally, I don't think that this is very critical, especially when you have your tower leveled up to 5 or 6 strength. If you get 5 or 6 extra units walking into the baseline that weren't going to do that, you're probably winning that game. So you don't care that your tower dies.
You just hit on why it's important, though. At 3 health, that's a huge deal.
Right.
At 4 health, that is a level 5 Blade Storm. So it is quite critical that you level this up. And at an epic, it's fairly expensive. So I think you hit on exactly why that timer's in there. I think it's a motivator for people to level this up to really be able to get good utility out of it. Anyway, continue.
That's fair. And, really, we talk about a timer for the tower, but a timer is really what this does for your opponent. If you can stick this on your back row when you're applying pressure, that pressure is going to get to the base faster than your opponent is used to. They're going to have trouble keeping up with the number of units coming in, and it puts them on a clock to defend. And I think that's really what the strength of this tower is. Really, it's all a lot of theory at this point, as people are still testing the card out and understanding what they've got here. But we're going to try to talk you through what kind of decks do you want to play this in, because I play a lot of mid-range form right now. Arthas, I know you're in the same boat, and I really see this fitting in well there, because the tower only boosts unit movement in the column that it's in. It immediately makes me think of Zuri and makes me think, hey, I want to maximize my column effects, right? Buff everything in a column, and then next turn drop this and protect that column a little bit. And now everything that I just buffed is going to move into the base faster than my opponent can handle.
It's pretty cool. I mean, if you think about it, when Zuri buffs units, typically those units are really, really hard to deal with, right? So, it's likely they will survive. So it's kind of likely that they get boosted by the Temple of Focus. And then let's say maybe they decide not to throw mana into your units, and then they work to get frontline to kill the Temple of Focus. Well, now your units have free reign to harvest their base, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because a mid-range deck like this is really susceptible to being outrushed, but if you can land the Zuri buff and drop this tower and still be alive afterward, like you're really turning the tables on your opponent.
Yeah, and with like decent strength, like at max level, it's 7 strength. That's stronger than cheap units at 6. So it typically takes 2 cards to deal with that structure. You can actually put this structure on your second row, where you can defend while applying pressure implicitly with your other units in front. That kind of dynamic, I really love that they can add to the game.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I really like that play. In fact, that's a jaw-dropping play right there.
Exactly. And people don't realize that's an actual play, but when I came up with it, I'm like, yeah, I think I can make this work. And with so much strength, obviously it needs to be like a decent level for your league, right? Because the strength's pretty important. You don't necessarily have to use its ability all the time. You can run a deck with Hearth Guards. Finally, Swarm gets a nice 3 mana like structure that isn't useless like Moonlit. Or I don't know, maybe some people make this to be even more useless. I don't know. But what's nice is that you could still use it for its frontline because it's stronger than most cheap units. And, cheap structure for Hearth Guards, cheap for defense. But then it also has that bonus if you place it in the right place to just like hit them hard. Because I mean, something I found with Zuri is that, yeah, you get so much value, but it's like quite an investment because like only Zuri with the 6 or 7 strength is in front, and then the big units are like a tile behind or 2 tiles behind, and it's like, oh, the enemy's like, wow, that's a lot of value, but then it's gonna take a while before they get to my base, so it's like, wow, maybe it's a bit slow, but this one straight up accelerates that double the speed. So it really puts them on a timer. It's great.
Yeah, it absolutely puts them on a timer. One thing to note, I don't know that we've hammered this home quite enough. The movements generated by this tower are in the tower activation phase at the beginning of your turn, not the unit movement phase. So a Shady Ghoul, and this shout out to Merc for this because the first video I saw of it came from Merc. A Shady Ghoul gets pushed into your base. It shouldn't, or your opponent's base. It shouldn't have gone in, but the tower helped motivate it, pushed it an extra movement forward. Because of that, the Shady Ghoul, if it spawns left or right rather than backwards, has now put a unit on your opponent's baseline. At the beginning of the unit movement phase, that unit will also go into base. So small things like that. Arthas, what happens if I have this tower and a Moonlit area? You brought it up already. So let's say is there a particular order that I have to play those 2 towers such that my satyrs get buffed and then motivated into the base?
Right. In the order that you want, since Moonlit doesn't need to be in a particular column. All it needs to be is that the Temple of Focus should be somewhere towards like the bottom right relative to the Moonlit. So either below it or to the right of it or both. That makes it so that the Temple of Focus triggers after the Moonlit. And the reason why there's this particular direction is, again, to reiterate, the way that structures trigger and their order is actually like a reading order. It's like left to right from top to bottom. So you want to put it in an order where Moonlit triggers before Focus. So if you are running a Moonlit Focus deck,
Good luck.
yeah, firstly, good luck. And also,
there's something there. It could work.
and if you happen to find a time where you're not sure where to play your Moonlit or Focus, and any side like it doesn't make a difference, you want to put your Focus towards the right, or you want to put your Moonlit towards the left. Just a general tip.
Love it. Love it. All right. Any other? So you've been experimenting with this quite a bit. Any other interesting or odd interactions that you've found since you've started experimenting? Also, shout out to Evil Deck for doing a lot of the experimenting with you.
Yeah, Evil Deck and Kep, both of them actually. So a lot of these like buggy, in like air quotes, buggy interactions come with whether or not the temple takes damage. Because, from the ability it says deal 1 damage to itself when boosted unit reaches the enemy base. And by the way, base does not mean enemy baseline. Baseline does not equal base, okay? So let's just get that out there. But there are times where an enemy does go into the base because of a focus, but that particular focus does not take damage. Or other cases where it doesn't go in, but it does take damage. And from what I tested, and this is basically like a long story short, the focus actually takes the board state and the units in front of it, and then it predicts where all of those units will end up. So if it finds units in front of it that are predicted to walk into the enemy base, usually when you pretend they have 2 speed, if they're going to walk into the enemy base, that particular temple that triggered will take the damage however many units went into the base. That sounds very confusing, and it really is, because it's much easier to explain when there are visuals. And by the way, I have a lot of like footage and screenshots. I have like so many different interactions that I was testing up till like 5 a.m. last night. I was having so much fun.
What level is your Temple of Focus right now, out of curiosity?
Well, actually, it's at level 2 with 1 extra copy. Only because I bought the pack that comes with the 3 copies. Yeah, because I'm a whale and I want it. But I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I could make a really detailed video and explaining this, but I'm a bit hesitant. I don't know if people are actually interested, because like most of these bugs are like very, very edge cases. Like if you're dealing with like Faithless Prophets or with like Mia.
Wait, stop right there. Whoa. So you're playing this with Harvester trying to steal a Mia.
Yeah.
That is an edge case, but now I'm curious. Tell me about this. What happens when you have Mia?
All right. So because like Freeloader mentioned, when a temple triggers, it actually moves, like commands the unit forward during its trigger. So that literally happens the same thing with Mia. If you trigger it, it just moves with all the units in front of your focus forward. That's just all, just does what's expected. And but it gets even more complicated though when you put multiple temples in the same column. But yeah, that's gonna be hard to explain without visuals. So if you guys really want me to make this video, and I assure you I can explain it so well, probably better than anyone right now, so I had almost no sleep. Yeah, please let me know, because I'm really hesitant to make it.
Get some rest and put it together. You can be the definitive encyclopedia of the Temple of Focus.
I can make like a whole kitty guide for it.
Yes.
But like, what if it gets patched? All that work.
No. It's not all that work. It's all the extra work you'll have to do after that.
All right. I see. I appreciate that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get down to the bottom line here.
Yes,
which is, this is a 3-mana card that commands unit forward, and that sounds an awful lot like a very popular Swarm card. is this worth putting in my deck instead of Forgotten Souls?
No.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
Well, I think the answer very much depends on your level of Forgotten Souls, because at
Well,
level
yes.
5, Forgotten Souls is very different than it is, even at levels 3 or 4. But also, I think they just don't go into the same kind of deck in
Correct.
general. That's going to be, the biggest challenge that I see is trying to build a deck that takes advantage of this persistent movement effect as opposed to a one-time effect like Forgotten Souls is. Forgotten Souls is a fantastic card. There's a reason why it's probably the number one Swarm card in terms of popularity right now. Uh, it's because it is a beautiful finisher when you get something at your opponent's baseline that is either big or does a lot of damage, like Devastators. It just closes a game out for you. But building a deck that takes advantage of a persistent extra movement effect where you can continue to attack the same side of the board, I think that's going to be really tough to put together, and curious to see what people come up with.
Yeah, so let me highlight like the biggest difference between something like Forgotten or Herald's Hymn versus this Temple of Focus is that Forgotten and Herald's Hymn, they trigger the extra movement instantly. Here with the Temple of Focus, it gives the enemy time to counterplay you, and it's not entirely guaranteed that you're gonna get that ability of,
Sure, it takes a lot of planning, and your opponent might just run execution.
exactly.
And
That's why
all
I really suggest that if people are serious about testing this card, which I definitely recommend for a bit, don't tunnel vision into thinking, oh, this card's only good for its ability. No, it has good strength. Use it. There are other uses for this cheap structure. It doesn't have to be just the ability. You could do both. I would say the ability is a bonus, but yeah, that's just my tip.
No, I totally agree. If you want at the same, so it is an epic, first off, right? So we need to talk about that. It is an epic, not a common. But if you have it at the same levels as a Fort of Ebenrock, it's just a better option. Like, yes, it's 1 health less than a Fort of Ebenrock, but it has an upside that Fort doesn't.
That's true. And to be fair, the tower's ability doesn't change as it levels. Only the strength of the tower changes. So you
Correct.
can put it in at a low level and test it out and see if it's working for you before you commit a ton of resources to it.
Right.
Oh yeah.
If nothing else, it's going to force your opponent to put resources into it. And that's not nothing. You can't leave this on the board. At least I don't think you can. I don't think your opponent can afford to leave this on the board. You play it, your opponent has to clear it. And that in and of itself is value.
Absolutely. It's a lot like winter decks playing the Hearth, right? Like,
Yes.
you can play around it by just removing all the units so that the Hearth has nothing to buff every turn, but that's a risky strategy, and you're much better off in the long run usually just putting the damage into the structure in the first place. And I suspect this will end up filling the same kind of role, even if you're just using it as bait for an execution.
Well, if I wanted to play a Moonlit Ares Satyr deck, what better card to put in to try to bait out the execution so that my Moonlit Ares clear the next turn?
There you go.
Boom.
Or even for your pillars.
Right? Like, that's the thing, is this is a threat. It is not a finishing card. The game will continue after you play it. You play Potion of Growth Forgotten Souls, the game's over. You play this, the game will continue, but this is now a threat on the board that needs to be dealt with. And I just love that. I love the fact that I can play a card that then dictates what my opponent has to do in response. Either, to Sabaiku's point, he has to clear the 2 units I've got in front of it, even if they're both Doppelbock pieces. Who cares? They need to put 2 units into that, or a runner, or they need to clear this. That's a lot of mana they're putting into nothing.
Mm-hmm. People should not undervalue that, like, oh, it's kind of a bad play if you play this card, because I know they have this particular card to counter that card. Like, for example, oh, I don't want to play True Shot because I know they have Execution right now. No, it's not necessarily a bad play to play True Shot, even if it gets executed, because there is some serious value when you can limit your enemy's options. If you force them to do something that they may or may not want to do, that actually gives you an advantage relative to them.
100%. I don't think this is an auto include for Swarm, and I'm thankful for that, to be quite honest. The last thing I want is an epic entered into the game right now that I need to somehow level up to level 4 or 5 so that I can play it in a deck, right? But at the same time, even at level 1, this is pretty darn enticing.
Yeah, and I really love the kind of implications this gives to the other 5 structures that are coming, which we don't know about yet, like what the abilities are. We just know the artworks, which you can find in the Discord upcoming teasers channel. Yeah, I mean, if they're making such unique mechanics like this, so unique that leveling it up doesn't change the mechanic, it's just that special. I can't wait to see the next ones.
I like the fact that it's a cheap tower because it feels like it's going to find a niche. If it was another 5 mana tower, I would just say it has to be better than True Shot.
Yeah.
I don't know that it is better than True Shot at 5 mana, but gosh, it doesn't have to be. It's 3 mana. It just has to be better than Fort, and it is. All right, guys. So after that, we've got to discuss, while we're on the subject of column effects, our card of the week, which is, I'm sorry to say, Mechanical Workers.
Heck yeah.
I love that card, bless its heart, but I can't say it without laughing.
Yeah, and just to do another shout out again, Frozen Earth, one of the mods on the Stormbound Discord, he sent a deck order which includes the Mechanical Workers. And I personally handcrafted that deck, and I gotta say, I'm actually so proud of it. It has so many synergies. It's got a real objective in the game, and when I'm playing it, oh man, it's delicious.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the deck could do just as well even without the card. But hey, look, the card's not useless. It's got its own synergies. Like I put like Fort Tonic, Mia, and Hearth Guards, and like Mechanical Workers provides the structure for Fort Tonic and Hearth Guards. It also provides constructs for the upgrade point, and then.
But does Mechanical Workers move away from the so for those of you who don't know, and it's understandable if you don't, Mechanical Workers is 6 mana. Its levels 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 for its strength. It has 1 movement, which means that when you play it, I believe it moves away from, it spawns a 3/3, 4, 5, 6 health structure behind it, which makes a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 construct. Boy, that is a complicated set. Look, at the end of the day, it makes a mechanical workshop behind it, which creates a construct. As you level up your mechanical workers, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So does the tower behind it, and so does the spawns from that tower. All of that being said, I believe the mechanical workers itself steps away from that tower, which is important because
That
otherwise
is correct. Yep.
it would be in the way of the tower spawning on the following turn. So that's good. But it also means that you can't just play mechanical workers into Fort Tonic and expect anything to happen, because guess what? It won't. The mechanical workers are too far away.
Unless you attack sideways.
Right.
Okay, well, there we go. So, right, we could play it in a situation where it attacks sideways and hope that it lives, and then play Fort Tonic. This doesn't see a ton of play. Sabaiku, why is it not seeing a ton of play?
That's a great question, because when you read the card text, it really seems like something you would want in a mid-range ironclad deck, right?
Lots of value.
It's got a decent sized body. It's got movement, so it can trade into another unit, and it creates a structure, which then provides value going forward, right? So it does a lot, but it also does a lot for 6 mana. Typically, on a 6 mana play, you're looking to really dominate the board. You're not trying to set up value for future turns at this point. You're either trying to keep yourself from getting killed against a rush deck, or B, put overwhelming pressure on a slower deck where playing something like Destructibots, Green Prototypes, and Upgrade Point, where you're putting down a tower that generates value, you're putting down a couple units, and these will provide immediate threat as opposed to a long range threat. The problem with mechanical workers is that they spawn the structure behind, so you can never place the structure aggressively, really. Best you can do is middle of the board. And that, I think, is the biggest liability, is that it needs a lot of room to operate in order to provide value 3 turns in the future. It's really hard to pull that off.
Yeah, Arthas, even if I'm putting the mechanical workers onto my opponent's baseline as a threat, the tower never has a chance of spawning to the left or right where it might actually protect my unit from an attack, right? Like it's always going to be behind, which means in the best case for it, it's always going to be middle of the board.
When you think about it, because it is spawning a mech workshop, right? The enemy doesn't even need to kill the mech workshop to deny its value, which really sucks. You can just put a unit in front of it, even if it's just some measly toad. The entire factory shuts down because health inspector deemed it not worthy.
Like a rain of frogs, for example, shut it, right?
Exactly. It's like, so like, on paper it's like, wow, this is so much value, but it's just the root of the problem, mech workshop. It's so hard to make mech workshop like work despite its name. It's just it has so many conditions that need to be met, such as the space in front. Also, like, because it's a structure that provides a lot of value, you want to put it near your baseline as much as you can to make it as safe as you can, but it doesn't provide that instant value. And then when it does, it's like just the unit sometimes, it's just not that reliable.
Yeah, it's the structure is the kind of thing that your opponent can ignore or just block off for a couple turns, and now you're left taking that tempo hit from playing the structure, even though you've got a relatively decent sized body to go along with it with the 6, 7, 8 strength rodent. It's just not enough to overwhelm what your opponent can respond to with 6 mana or 7 mana.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So there are two types of towers, right? There are towers that provide value in terms of just their mana to strength, and then there are towers that provide continuing value in terms of things like resources. In the case of some of the mana or buffing to other units, or in the case of this one, an additional unit, which seems on paper fantastic, but it is the easiest one of all of them to deny that additional value as the opponent. I can't think of anything else that is easier to stop than a mechanical workshop in terms of getting value out of it. Is that the biggest problem with this? Is just, I'll throw this out there. If the mechanical workshop spawn happened regardless of whether or not there was an opponent's unit in front of it, and it actually attacked and traded with it. So if my opponent sticks a 3 health unit in front and my mechanical workshop makes a 5 health construct, I suddenly just have a 2 health construct in front. Would that change the calculus in terms of whether or not it's a good enough card to play?
Oh yeah, that's a significant change for sure. That would be amazing. A lot of people have been wishing for something like that. I don't know if they'd be able to implement something like that, but yeah, that would be awesome, right?
Well, if I play Rain of Frogs, I don't prevent my Winter Pact opponent from getting mana.
Yeah, it's just it's really sad the way it's done right now. Because I mean, okay, this puts us into the topic of like a lot of these off meta cards tend to be easily defeated by positioning. I know there are a lot of cards out there that have conditions for them to work well, but I would say that conditions that require positioning are probably the hardest and most limiting conditions that could easily make a card unplayable. So, for example, like here with the mechanical workers, you need a space behind your mechanical workers to spawn the structure, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mech workshop needs a space in front. Yeah, makes sense.
Yep. Yep.
And then let's think about many of those column based abilities like flaming stream or like avian stalkers, like that kind of like positioning condition. It's just not reliable for a game like Stormbound and the way that people spread their units apart. And then like other cards, for example, like let's say Lich Summoners, right? It needs a space behind. If you trade into an enemy on your baseline, even if it survives, it doesn't get that extra value. And then with Zuri, I mean, even with its popularity, if you really like dissect its conditions, not only does it need a space in front to fly to, but it also needs space behind, and that's what makes it really hard to like set up sometimes, which warrants its the kind of strength it provides when you do pull off the setup. So that's really cool. But positional conditions are what makes a lot of the cards in the game kind of unplayable.
And you see that Zuri provides value right away. So even though it's inconsistent to pull off, it's worth it because when you do get to play it, you get a lot out of it. with Mechanical Workers or Mech Workshop, when you play it, you're not guaranteed to get value out of it.
No, that's not
You
true.
have to still continue to hope.
No, you get a tower out of it. All right, guys. Well, that ends the main portion of this episode, which means it's time for me to remind you. Please follow us on Twitter at Brewed Sages and email us at thebrewedsages@gmail.com. This week, we did receive some feedback from Evil Deck. He said, quote, "I'm so sorry. I could not find a use for Joust Champion. As a cat main, I can say that Rapid Mousers has no place in the game unless it gains strength or if it leans into the confusion mechanic. If it confused a random enemy unit before each attack, for example, it would see play like Vindicators do, where its value lies in the ability, but it cannot become cheaper." I actually really like this, I have to say.
Wow, that was really cool, actually.
Really cool idea. I love that idea for Rapid Mousers. Anyway, thank you so much for the feedback, Evil Deck. Good luck this week with Mechanical Workers. And to anybody else who's listening, feel free to give it a shot. Good luck. That's going to do it for this episode. For Arthas and Subaiku, I am Freeloader. We are the Brewed Sages, reminding you to stay hydrated.